Well, it is officially 3 o'clock. You guys ready to rock and roll?
Yeah.
Should we get this party started? Okay. All right. Well, first of all, thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Michael Steizner, and I'm the founder and CEO of Social Media Examiner. Anybody familiar with Social Media Examiner? Okay, cool. Great. Well, for those of you that are not familiar with Social Media Examiner, we are a blog that helps marketers figure out how to use social media. We have a podcast that I'm the host of called the Social Media Marketing Podcast. We just celebrated 8 million downloads on that podcast. And we also have a conference called Social Media Marketing World here in San Diego, if anybody wants to come back, at the convention center, 4,000 people. And I also have a live show every Friday at 8 Pacific where we talk about all the craziness that happened in the last week of social media. And that's just kind of a quick summary of kind of what we're all about. So with that, let's get into the presentation. First of all, let me learn more about you guys. Raise your hand if you're a blogger. Okay, so about half of you. Raise your hand if you are a marketer. Okay, those of you that are not marketers, I'm curious, what do you guys do? What do you do?
Financial advisor.
Financial advisor. Okay, cool. Raise your hand if you have any website that you drive traffic to. Okay, so almost all of you raise your hand. Excellent. So one of the things that we struggle with as marketers, and I'm going to call you all marketers, okay? So even though you don't think you're a marketer, you really are a marketer, right? Because if your job is to sell financial services, you are a marketer. How do we know what we're doing is working? Can we prove that what we're doing is working? When it comes to financial stuff, you need to be able to prove that what you're doing is working, probably for your clients. But the question is, can you prove what you're doing is working for yourself? Are any of you consultants, just out of curiosity, where you have clients? Okay, none. So all of you guys are pretty much business owners. Raise your hand if you're business owners. Okay, so almost all of you either work for a business or you have your own business. This is my Twitter ID in case any of you guys want to tweet. I do suggest that you take some pictures. Do they provide you guys the slides? They do? Okay. Well, there might be a couple slides here where you want to take some pictures because this is going to be a very actionable presentation. The hope is that by the time we're done here, you can go back to your hotel room, go back to your offices, and immediately begin answering some of the challenging questions. So this is me hiking in a canyon in San Diego when I came up against what you can't really see very clearly here, which is a big old difficult rock that I needed to traverse. And I was doing this as part of a film shoot, and up there, I actually bit it, and I fell, and we got it all on camera, but we didn't end up using that, and I took a serious spill, okay? But this is a great metaphor for the journey that I was on because I am also the founder and CEO of my own business. And one of the challenges that I had inside of my business was that we were doing a lot of things because we were doing a lot of things. If anybody asks you, why are you doing it? And you say, because that's how we've always done it, this is one of those times to maybe question whether or not what you're doing is really working. And this is a good metaphor for me facing a challenge in my life, which is that I didn't have enough time to do all the activities that I needed to do. Raise your hand if you can relate to that. Okay, so I'm going to empower you to be able to know exactly whether what you're doing is actually moving the needle for your business. So these were some of the struggles. And funny enough, when I was doing this film shoot, I came up against this little sign at a cross in the road, and there was nothing on the sign. And it's a perfect metaphor, right? We're at this crossroads where we have to decide, what are we going to do with our time? Should we go left? Should we go right? Should we double down on Facebook? Should we get involved with Snapchat, Instagram? What about all this other stuff? So where should we focus on our efforts? What's going to bring us the greatest return so that when we do whatever we do, it's going to help grow the business? Can we prove that what we're doing is working? And should we make a stopping list? You know, so many of us do too much, and there should be a stopping list. So these are some of the challenges that I struggled with and that I'm sure all of you struggled with, but I don't struggle with it anymore. So it's my hope that by the time we're done, you're going to be able to answer these kinds of questions. All right. We're going to talk about Google Analytics. Raise your hand if you have installed Google Analytics on your website. Okay. Raise your hand if you have no clue what Google Analytics is. Okay, a couple of you. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about, just for a minute, what Google Analytics can do for those that don't know, but I'm going to spend the most of the time assuming you understand. This is for everyone. Out of the box, if you install Google Analytics on your website, along the left side on Google Analytics, it's A, B, C, just like the alphabet, except it's 2 A's and a B and a C. So it's audience, acquisition, behavior, and conversions, okay? Underneath audience is this little tab called social down there. And then underneath there is a little thing that says overview. And overview tells you out of the box what kind of traffic you're getting from Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all the major social networks, okay? The problem is that's all it tells you. And there's a lot of things that you can falsely assume by looking at this data. For example, it doesn't tell you with Facebook whether the traffic coming from Facebook is because you posted it on your Facebook page or if it's because someone shared your content on social media. And that's very important, right? Because we get in a habit of posting things all the time on Facebook. And when we see our Facebook traffic number goes up, we just assume it's because of our efforts. But it indeed may not be the case. So we can make a lot of false assumptions. Also, we don't really know whether or not easily our activities, the actions that we take, are going up or going down and moving the needle over time. We can just see the total aggregate of what's happening. We also don't know what kinds of updates. So for example, if today I tested an update with a picture in it, and tomorrow I tested an update without a picture in it, and then I wanted to, over a period of time, look at all the updates that had pictures and figure whether they drove more conversions, right? And conversions might be signing up for our email list or filling out a form that says I want a financial analysis. We can't tell that kind of stuff out of the box at all. So these are the kind of challenges that you cannot get answered inside of this current system. So here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about something called Google UTM Tracking. We're going to talk about what it is. We're going to talk about how to actually track and how to set up your conversions and then how to interpret it so that you can make smart decisions, just like you all probably make interpretation of the financial industry for your clients. We're going to give you that same power to be able to do it for yourself and for all the marketing efforts that you have. So here's the benefits. You will know exactly everything that you do. You will know whether it makes a difference or not. And this is one of the awesome things that you're capable of doing that most people don't realize. You'll know inside of one centralized location. You won't have to dig around in analytics inside of Facebook and then dig around at analytics and kind of inside of Twitter and figure out this or that. It'll all be centralized. You'll be able to very rapidly spot trends. For example, you'll know that the Facebook algorithm is actually hurting you because you'll be able to see that your stuff used to get a certain reach and it's not getting any reach. And when I say your stuff, your actual posts that you're posting. You'll be able to run experiments. This is how at Social Media Examiner we've been able to do all sorts of experiments and know whether it works or not. And that's really exciting. And you'll be able to prove that your investment of your time, and now I'm speaking the financial language, right? Your time is an investment. You can choose to put your time into social media. You can choose to put your time into email marketing. You can choose to put your time into any kind of marketing. But now, with this technology, you'll be able to test all of that. And you'll be able to know what's actually working. All right, here's the thing. I don't know if you can see this picture, but that's the inside of an aircraft. You guys, many of you flew here, and you probably looked into the cabin as you were getting on the plane, and you saw the captain in there with all these buttons and switches everywhere. And for you, it was like, whoa, at least somebody knows how to operate that thing. Thank goodness it's not me. So Google Analytics is kind of the same way. It is extremely complicated. It was developed by engineers, for engineers. It's really not intuitive at all. I am going to tell you just what you need to do to take off and to land, okay? I'm just going to tell you the absolute basics that you need, and honestly, you don't need any more. When you're done with this presentation, you will know everything that you need to know. Seriously, you won't need to do anything more. There will be a couple things that if you choose to want to dig deeper that you can dig deeper into. Okay, for the few of you that raised your hands and said, I don't even know what Google Analytics is, I'm going to explain it in this way. It's a piece of code that you put on every page of your website. That's it. That piece of code magically tracks things for you. That's all you need to know. I got to put a piece of code on the website. It's a set it once and forget it forever kind of a situation, okay? And you just simply can Google the phrase, how to set up Google Analytics, or you can just go to google.com/analytics. And I'm just going to show you in seconds what these steps are, and then we're going to get into the beef because I assume most of you have done this. But you click on admin, and then you click on your website. And every time you add a new website, you need to do this, okay? And then you go under tracking info, and then you get a little piece of code. You give that piece of code to your person who does your website, Or if you are a WordPress-driven website, usually the templates have a place where you can actually insert what's called the Google Analytics code. You paste it in there, and that's it. There's nothing more to it. It's that simple, okay? If you have somebody who, let's say you've got Google Analytics set up, and many of you do, but there might be someone who's working for you or someone who's a virtual assistant or a contractor, you can add them very easily to have access to your Google Analytics, which means you can delegate this responsibility to someone else. And it's very easy to do. You just go under admin and user management, and then you just simply put in their email address. The thing is they have to have a Google account, so you have to use their Google email address. And then they can go in, so you can teach them what you're learning here, and then you can have them do all this stuff for you. It's very, very simple. If you want to learn more at Social Media Examiner, you can go to socialmediaexaminer.com, and we've got detailed articles on everything you would ever want to know about this stuff. Okay, now let's get into the fun stuff. How many of you have goals set up in your Google Analytics? 1, 2. Okay, this is critical. A goal, by the way, here's how you get to goals. You go under admin, and then you click on your account information, and then it goes account, property, view, and then goals. Do you see where it says goals right there? You can take a picture of that if you want. But the next part is the part that matters, okay? Once you have Google Analytics set up on your website, it is watching everything. It's Big Brother in the cloud, multi-billion-dollar company watching everything, but it's worth it, trust me, because this is free software. You go under goal setup and look at all these options you've got. What is your goal? Reservations, making a payment, making an appointment, becoming a partner, creating an account. You can set up all these different goals, inquiries, get an estimate. So you can set as many goals as you want. And then, you can do more. I'm going to show you in just a second, but I like to choose custom, okay? So you click on custom, and once you click on custom, it's as easy as giving it a name, like newsletter subscribers. How many of you guys publish electronic newsletters? Okay, quite a few of you. So this should be a goal, newsletter subscribers. You assign it a slot. It's like this little room, like this room. And then you say, what's the type? In this case, destination. So where is that page you send them to after they fill out the form, right? Said another way, let's say you've got a Contact Me form on your website. And after they fill out that Contact Me form, usually you can send them somewhere else, like thank you for filling out the Contact Me form. That is the destination. But you can also set up different goals like duration. Maybe you want people to spend 15 minutes on your site, and for you that's an important goal. Or maybe you want them to view certain numbers of pages. Or maybe you want them to actually play a video. You can track all this stuff. But what I want you all to track is simply a destination. Because almost everybody, after you fill out a form, you can send them to a page. And as long as that page is on your website, Google will know automatically that they've filled out that form, okay? Does this make sense to everybody so far? Okay, so once you set up a goal, it's a set it, forget it, never look at it again, okay? So you've got the Google Analytics code, and you've got the goal, all right? And by the way, here is how easy it is to put that destination. You just literally type in the URL. And you can assign a value, too. So let's say you guys, every time you get someone to fill out a form, that's worth $50 for you or $1 for you. You have to put some metric in there. And then you just hit Create Goal. Super simple, okay? It's really brainless, actually. Now, once you've set up your Google Analytics code and you've got your goals, and you never need to do it again unless you want to create a new goal, this is where the magic stuff happens, okay? Google UTM Tracking. It stands for Urchin Traffic Monitor, and a little bit of history. Urchin is the company that Google bought, and that's the company that became Google Analytics. I like to call it Universal Tracking Metric because I think it's easier for you all to remember that. It's the secret sauce behind everything. It's the secret sauce that allows you to track every single thing that you do down to whatever minutia you want and to know whether or not it is accomplishing what you want it to accomplish. And it does so by simply providing a little snippet of code. And watch, when you see this next slide, you're going to recognize this. You guys ever been to a URL where you see a little slash and a question mark and a bunch of stuff? Guess what that is? Google UTM codes. Everybody uses it. You've all seen it. You didn't know what the heck it was. But in reality, all it is just a little piece of code that is added to the end of your URL. So here's an example of a post that we posted up on Facebook this week, okay? And then this is the actual destination. And that little piece of code doesn't mess up anything, okay? It doesn't change the way the page loads or anything like that. All it does is it tells Google where the source came from so that Google Analytics can begin tracking all this kind of stuff. Does that make sense to everybody? It's super, super simple, and I'm going to get into a lot more of its power. So here's what it does. First of all, it finally brings us the ability to know that what we are doing, what the actions we are taking on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook are actually what the output is. Like we can track the number of people, for example. We can track whether they've been to our website before, whether they're brand new, how much time they're spending, and whether or not they're actually converting. So, for example, anybody use LinkedIn here? Okay, so you could post something on LinkedIn right now, and you could come back in an hour on Google Analytics, and you could see that 7 people clicked on it. They spent an average of 2 minutes and 36 seconds, and one of them converted into a goal. How powerful is that? Very powerful, right? That's the kind of stuff that you can track with this. It's super powerful. You can also track over time. You can also compare time frames. So you can say, I want to look at all the traffic that came from me posting on LinkedIn this week versus last week. And I can track whether it's gone up or down. And I can look at what percentage of those people actually turned into customers. I can even determine that, you know what? LinkedIn is sending a ton of traffic to my website, but none of them are converting. Maybe I need to stop LinkedIn. So you begin to understand now all of a sudden this provides this level of data and interpretation that you just did not have before. Here's an example. This is a post that we had on Social Media Examiner. You can see it had 50,000 page views. And look at this first one here. Our Facebook page, it's saying, brought 35% of all that traffic over this particular period of time that we're looking at. Our email newsletter brought 27%. If we took those two factors out, there's not a lot left, is there? That equates for 30,000 out of 50,000. So I can look at that and I can say, wow, Facebook and the newsletter certainly are important for this particular article, right? And I can make smart decisions about, well, I better keep that newsletter going because that email newsletter is actually moving the needle. In addition, I can do things like I can look at an entire platform. So we track everything we publish on Twitter. So here's all of our Twitter. Over a period of time, we've got 18,000 sessions. And just so you guys understand what a session is versus a page view. A session is, I come to your website and I click around on 5 different pages and then I leave. That's considered a session. Does that make sense? Where a page view is 5 times, it's however many page views times the number of sessions. So that's why here we see like 18,000 sessions, and then we see 7,400 users. So we can kind of, see that. We can do some math here and say, okay, those 7,400 people looked at, were on the site multiple times. 40% of them were new, but moral of the story is this is traffic just from Twitter, okay? So our Twitter page, our updates that we actually put on Twitter brought in all this stuff, and you can see, for example, a bounce rate is how much time did they just stay on the website on one page and then leave? That's what a bounce rate is, just in case anybody wants to know. And for those of you that publish articles like we do, a high bounce rate is not a problem necessarily because they're coming to read an article and then they're leaving. But if you have like a 5-page process, and you want them to go to multiple pages and you want a really low bounce rate, we can see that they're spending an average of 1 minute and 11 seconds on the site. This is the cool part. We can look at how many of them turned into email subscriptions. 300 of them. 300 over this period of time got onto our email newsletter. For me, that's an important metric because I now know just by tweeting over this period of time, I got 300 new subscribers to my email newsletter. With that kind of data, I can say, all right, let's keep tweeting. It's worth the effort for us to continue to tweet because the goal that we care about, email newsletter subscriptions, is good. It's 1.62%, but that's okay. Most people don't get on the email newsletter. And maybe there's some things we can do to get that percentage higher by using conversion rate optimization. And what that means is it's a fancy word for maybe we can create better forms on our site to lure someone in to convert more because the goal of many of us as marketers is to drive traffic. And the hope is that a percentage of that traffic will do some action that we care about. In our case, it's getting on the newsletter list. And when they get on the newsletter list, we can feed them every day with new content. And the hope is that they'll become customers and come to Social Media Marketing World in San Diego, which is our main product. So any questions so far? You guys beginning to see how this works? So I'm going to show you how to actually do this now, okay? This is a URL you might want to write down. socialmediaexaminer.com/UTM. This is a short link that will drive you to a very long URL from Google that doesn't make any sense. I don't know why they don't have a simple URL like this. But it'll take you to the page where you can generate the code, okay? And basically, it's Google's UTM link builder, okay? It's super simple. You start by putting your website URL in there, and then you put in your source, medium, and name. And I'm going to explain how this works in just the next slide. And then you hit submit, and out pops that long URL. It's that simple. And that long URL you can store in a spreadsheet if you want, or you can immediately go to the social network and share it. But this is the practice that you want to get into. You want to get into the practice of everything you do, you add a UTM parameter to it. If you add something to your email newsletter, you want to do that. Even if you do print mailings, you want to create perhaps a UTM parameter and then shorten it, with some sort of like a bit.ly link or something, and then just put that in, a print mailer, and then you can actually know exactly how many people came off that mailer, how much time they spent on the site, and all that kind of stuff. So some of the questions that,
A brief question.
Yep.
So for that whole URL, you're putting, so if you just publish a post this morning, you're going to take that URL of that post and plug it into that?
Yes.
Okay, so you
That-
do it for each post.
That URL, well, yes, that URL, here, let me explain this because I think, actually, let me just see what my next, So here's the deal. Yes, and I'm going to get to this. Hold tight for a second because I want to explain this, and then the next slide I'm going to get into this. First and foremost, when you put in the fields here, like Facebook is the source, campaign, medium is Facebook page, when you put these things in, Google is case sensitive. So it's very important that you standardize on something, okay? So you notice here, like it says Facebook page with a capital P with a lowercase p and all lowercase. Google treats them all totally separate. So once you decide how you're going to do this, you need to stick to a standard because they're not going to group together unless you use the same exact variable, if you understand what I'm saying. So you can see here we made this mistake in the beginning. Down at number 12 and 13, it said Facebook page and Twitter page, all lowercase, and then we used the uppercase. So pick something, standardize on it, and if there's more than one person inside your company doing this, kind of create a central little, this is how we do it, document, and say it should all be lowercase or it should all be uppercase. Whatever you choose, just stick with it, okay? And here's the other thing to keep in mind. If you get super generic and just use the word Facebook, that could be used by other people. And let me explain how this works. Google doesn't know who added the UTM parameters. It could have been you. It could have been anybody. So you want to create something that's distinctly unique. That's why we use the capital F and the capital P, because we kind of figured what's the likelihood that someone else is going to use that. Or you could use the initials of your company. Like we could put capital SME for Social Media Examiner, and then we could put Facebook, something that no one else would use. Because it's the only way for us to really know and be able to distinguish that it's absolutely from our source, not somebody else. Because there's lots of companies that use UTM parameters when they're sharing other people's content. And they might use the exact same parameters that you use. So create something unique. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Let me explain, because there's 3 things you have to use. Google won't even let you create this URL unless you come up with a source, a medium, and a campaign. So I like to say that the source is the social network, okay? Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, whatever, right? Then the medium is going to be like, some of you have more than one Twitter page. So it might be Twitter page 1 and Twitter page 2. Facebook page, Facebook group, right? So you come up with some sort of variable to say, okay, underneath Facebook, we're going to call it whatever we want to call it. Because there's so many things you can do inside of Facebook. You might own a group. You might belong to a group. You might link into someone else's group. Standardize on just a couple to make it simple, because the medium is really the one that you're going to look at the most. And then at the campaign level, this is where you can start running experiments. For example, in our case, we have new versus evergreen. So we publish content every day at Social Media Examiner. So if it's come out today, we use the campaign new. If it's last week, we use the campaign evergreen. because we learn over time from here that certain content performs really well on certain social networks. Like, for example, articles about Facebook perform really well on Facebook. So we'll find the best performing articles that might be a month or 2 months old that are still accurate, and we'll tag an evergreen, and that way we know that this is the evergreen posts that are performing really well. Another option could be ad. You could put the word ad on there, right? Because many of you might be using Twitter or Facebook ads, and then you can track the traffic coming from an ad. And this is where it can start getting really interesting. And then content is another variable that you could use. This is where you can get crazy if you guys are seriously wanting to get crazy. We've done this. Big image, small image, square image. This is where you can start running different kinds of tests on the exact same piece of content. So you could take a post, and you could try it today with a big image and try it tomorrow with a small image. It would all still track as new in Facebook page, but then you'd be able to differentiate whether the image itself seems to make a difference in the quality of the traffic that you're sending. Yes?
Is that your Google Plus, or are those your Google search results?
It could be whatever you want it to be.
Okay, so how do
You can't put a plus in Google Analytics, but it was Google Plus at one point, but it could be Google Ad too.
Okay, got it, okay.
So whatever the like if you're running ads on Google, you might want to choose Google, and then maybe you put AdSense or AdWords or whatever the heck it is under Medium. Does that make sense? Because Google has all sorts of different products. So the main thing is that the source is the big umbrella source under which all these things live. Twitter, you might have multiple Twitter accounts. You might host a Twitter chat every week. And then you might have a special URL for people that are participating in the Twitter chat. So it would be Twitter, and then it would be Medium Twitter chat. So you could just kind of do whatever you want. So back to your question, this link is outputted out of the Google Analytics thing, and then this link is what you use whenever you post. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
You can't use the Facebook group, right?
You can do this anywhere. UTM parameters work anywhere, and you will not be penalized by any social network for using them. You won't. And you might be thinking, well, it's a long, ugly-looking URL, and that's true. You could try to shorten it, but I will warn you against using certain kinds of shorteners, because with Facebook in particular, when you paste in a URL, it actually pre-populates. Have you guys ever noticed this? And then you can remove the URL, so no one will actually see the URL. So when you post it in, it pulls in the picture and it pulls in the text, and then the URL is gone. Question back there? Yeah.
So you're doing this as soon as you create a new blog post. You go to YouTube.
As soon as I promote it.
As soon as you promote it.
Yes.
You just have it listed somewhere within your company so that anyone promoting that blog post can
Absolutely.
directly.
As a matter of fact, I don't have it in these slides, but I recommend creating a UTM library, if you will, or a UTM librarian. If you're a big enough company like we are, we actually have somebody who does this. But you have a spreadsheet where you house all these kinds of URL codes, and then like the social team goes in and it grabs the codes, and it's already pre-done for the team so that they know which codes to use. Or if you have a newsletter team and then you have a social team. And the idea is that's the ideal situation. You don't want multiple people going in and generating these because they're going to make mistakes. They're going to forget about the capitalization. Does that make sense?
Can you automate this process for every post that goes up
Can you automate the process by?
of generating the UTM?
There might be some tools, but I don't know if you can. Somebody on my team got really smart, and they generated a spreadsheet where you just put in the URL, and it automatically appended the proper things into the proper columns so that people could just go in and grab it. I would imagine there might be some tools that will do this, but they're going to need to know those key variables, the source, campaign, and the medium. Real quick here, let me show you what this looks like once you start using UTM parameters. Before you use UTM parameters, all your social traffic would show up under social. This is critical. It moves, okay? So you're going to freak out when you start using this, and you're going to think, holy cow, my social traffic just dropped like a rock. Well, it didn't drop. It just moved, okay? It gets reclassified as far as Google is concerned, so it moves from social to other. And what you'll see happening now is what's left in social is purely word-of-mouth sharing. Does that make sense? Because it's all the stuff that has nothing to do with you. It's the stuff that people went to your site, they thought it was really cool, and they shared it on Facebook or Twitter. So what's left under social is just pure, beautiful people sharing on their own goodwill, okay? or using some sort of a plugin in a Chrome browser that allows them to one-click share kind of thing, it gets reclassified under other. Now, not everything under other is going to be your UTM traffic, but here's what I recommend. Before you start using UTMs, go under other. If there's nothing there, and then there is something there afterwards, then it's all what your stuff is. But this is a very easy way to kind of add these two numbers together and understand the total impact of your UTM parameters. Now, eventually, you're going to start with social, and then you're going to get into your newsletters and everything. So that's when it's like, this is not going to be of much value to you. But this is just kind of the overview that Google provides you. Was there other question? Yes?
Yeah, so you create your blog post, you put it in there, you get your code, you created it for Facebook, and then you shared it on Facebook. And you go back in and you do the same exact thing if you're tracking Twitter?
Correct.
Okay.
You don't even have to. You'll begin to understand what the code looks like, and you'll just know where to edit it, because it's really quite simple. It's just like, it just says like campaign equals, source equals, and you can just go in there and you can edit the URL yourself if you want to. Eventually, you don't have to use the builder because it's so simple. I mean, eventually it'll become second nature. That's why you can easily build some script or something in a spreadsheet that can automatically generate these things for you. So when you have all this, here's what you can figure out now. You'll know, for example, whether the traffic that you are actually generating from Facebook is going up or going down. Because here's the thing. Traffic might be going up from Twitter, let's say. And you just might be assuming, whoa, it must be because we've started tweeting more frequently. But you don't really know. It could have been one high-profile influencer who just happened to pick it up and share it, and that equates to all this new traffic. Now you'll know. You'll be able to see, okay, how is it this week versus last week? How is it this month versus last month? And you'll also be able to separate out what's left, right? So remember I told you the traffic that you share is moved into this new category. What's left is just the stuff that people seem to be sharing without your efforts. And it may be that the sharing that you're doing is driving a consistent amount of traffic every month, but the organic sharing is completely dropped. And then you might want to be thinking about ways to spur people to share your content. For example, you've seen on blog posts, these little click to tweet kind of things and social share buttons. You might want to figure out whether there's something wrong with your social share buttons. Some of these tools, for example, Noah Kagan, who's here at Sumo Me, if you upgrade to a certain level of his tools, you can actually use UTM parameters inside of his tool. So this is really cool. So our social share bar on the side of Social Media Examiner is tagged Sumo Me. So we know exactly how much traffic that social share bar is driving back to our website. And that's awesome because we know, okay, these are people organically sharing when they come to the website using the tool that we built for them, with Noah, that Noah built and that we set in place for them because we're tracking it. We can also know whether or not our, we can know whether the evergreen stuff is outperforming the new stuff and maybe help get creative and say, okay, you know what? Our best post, republishing it 6 times a quarter, is so much better than just recreating new content. So you might actually realize you've got this one killer post, and many of you might have this mentality like we do, where you publish something new every week. But it might be just 4 or 5 pillar posts on your website that are killing it as far as the conversions that you care about. You'll be able to know that, and then you'll be able to consistently reshare that new content. And we do this all the time at Social Media Examiner. A significant portion of what we share is our older content. But a rerun isn't a rerun if you've never seen it before. That's how you got to think about it, right? Because it's not like the cable box where it's got the new word on it, right? So it's really cool what you can do. All right, real quick, you can do date analysis. This is where it gets really cool. So you can say, I want to look at this month, this year versus this month last year. This is where you can start looking at seasonal trends. Because you might be pulling your hair out of your head saying, well, what the heck happened? This month was horrible compared to last month. And there may be a seasonality to everything that happens in your industry, and you won't know that until a good year has gone by. But then you can begin to look at those kind of trends. So for example, in this case, we can see that our Facebook page traffic is down 30-some%. That's a problem, right? Holy cow, that's a serious problem. That's how we know at Social Media Examiner that the Facebook algorithm is killing us because we're seeing radical declines. We know because we're using UTM parameters. And to do it, it's real simple. Basically, you just go under Acquisition, Campaigns. Underneath this campaign column is where all the data lives, okay? So you go under Acquisition, Campaign, All Campaigns. And this might be one you want to take a picture of, okay? Because this is the critical analysis that you need to do. And then across the top there, it says Primary Dimension, Campaign Source, and Medium. You click on Medium. That's where the medium showed up that you've identified, like Facebook page, okay? And then over here, Conversions, you can actually click on Conversions, and your little goals will pop up right there. And you can begin to say, like, okay, for this month, the Facebook page brought in, and I didn't select it here, but if I did, it would have said how many actual email conversions I brought in. And I can compare that against the same month last year with one click of a button, all inside of Google Analytics. So this is where it gets super powerful. And then eventually you can map out, okay, there's January is our best month. Summers are really bad because everybody's on vacation. Even though we're getting the traffic, it's not converting as well. But you can even look at whether they're on a mobile device. I mean, it's really cool stuff that you can look at with this. This is where it gets crazy cool, okay? Remember, it's acquisitions, campaigns, all campaigns is how you get to all this stuff. This is kind of a zoom in of it. This is just a zoom in of the very same thing I was showing you on the prior slide. And you see campaign, source, medium. All right? So what you can do is you can click in on one medium, like our Facebook page. And let's just say that we want to actually understand more about our Facebook page. When we click on that, we can add what's called a secondary dimension, okay? And there's this little thing right here that says secondary dimension. I want to know this is where it gets cool. I want to know over the last month of all the links that I shared to my website, I want to know which ones are converting the most. And the reason I want to know that is I want to know what the Facebook audience, what articles on the Facebook audience I ought to be republishing just to Facebook. So you can literally start typing in the word landing page, okay? And then what it will do, and I know this is a little bit confusing, but look at what it will do. On the left, it shows my Facebook page, and then it shows all the URLs sorted by the number of sessions. And then over here, way up at the top, I chose email subscriptions, and I can see, all right, look at this one. This first one got 23 email goals, but this one only got 6. So the fourth one, which brought in a lot of traffic, is not converting very well. I'm definitely not going to put that in my evergreen queue. I'm not going to, because even though I'm driving traffic, it's hollow traffic. It's not doing anything for the business. So this is where it gets really cool, because we can do the same thing for Twitter. I can look at all the traffic coming from Twitter, and I can sort it by whatever I care about. Do I care about time on site? I can click time on site to sort it. Do I care about conversions? I can look at that. I can sort it by anything. And I know you might be saying, wow, this is getting kind of complex. But it's really not that complex because the data is forever there. And once you understand that you can add this secondary dimension, it starts getting fascinating. Because now you can all of a sudden do something quite customized. Any questions so far? Yeah.
I've only seen on some pages 60% or 70%
60 or 70% visibility? When you say visibility, what do you mean?
Like it's not showing me all of the activity. In the very right-hand corner.
Okay.
There's a little yellow. Anyone else see it? There's a little yellow explanation point since you're only seeing about 80%.
It might be because
Do you have 360? Is that what?
I don't know about that. But here's what I will tell you. There are ad blockers. You guys ever heard of ad blockers? So ad blockers are becoming more popular, and ad blockers block Google Analytics. So maybe Google Analytics is telling you that you've got a lot of people turning on ad blockers, and therefore this is not the totality of all of your traffic. Because what an ad blocker does is it searches for the code and then it blocks it. And it could be very much that this is only a sampling of the totality. But it's enough sampling that you can make judgments on what works and what doesn't. I don't know the answer to your question, honestly.
I just figured it was Google asking us to pay.
No, no way, not at all. We see everything, so I don't really know what that is. I just know how to fly the plane and how to land it. So it's a good question. Here's another thing you can do with secondary dimensions. Again, remember you just have to get, and I'm going to tell you how to get here again. Go back a couple slides. It's just, you're basically going under acquisition, okay? And then you're clicking on campaigns. This is a zoom in on acquisition campaigns, and that brings you up to the point where you can choose, source, medium. This is where all that data lives. Acquisition, campaigns. You're trying to acquire a customer or traffic. That's where that data lives, okay? And then when you click on this little thing here that says secondary dimensions, you can do gobs and gobs of deeper analysis. Here's a cool one. You can add a secondary dimension to explore if certain types of content perform best. So in this particular case, we are actually clicking on medium, but we're typing in campaign. And you remember I talked about with campaigns, we set up new versus evergreen, or it might be paid versus organic, whatever you want. Now we're clicked in on Facebook, and we can see here for this period of time, which is like 30 days or a week or whatever it is, this is our new content versus our evergreen content. And we can see in this particular case, our evergreen content's killing it, and it should kill it because we selected the best content that performs on Facebook, and we share it over and over again, right? And over here, we can see, look at this, 591 conversions versus 168. So this is where you can start really getting down into the weeds here and say, okay, this is how I know this type of content is converting better than other types of content. Here's what we do at Social Media Examiner with this data. We simply put a simple little chart together, okay? And on the left, we've got the social network. And then we've got the organic number. And remember, the organic number is what Google tells you is now classified under social. And then we've got the team, the social media team at Social Media Examiner. Their number is very easily calculated because we tag everything. We know they brought in this many sessions. 75% of all of our traffic from Facebook is from our efforts, we now know. And what we do is we total all the numbers, and this just gives us a snapshot. And then eventually what we can do is we can begin comparing month over month. So we can say, okay, look at this. We're down 12% on Facebook, and we're up 51% on Pinterest. That's really good, And we come together and we talk about this, and we say, how ought we change our strategy? Because now that we know this is what we're doing to move the needle, it makes it very easy. We also track the new versus evergreen on a month-to-month basis. So, for example, you can see May and June, and then we've got the numbers there. This is how we can justify republishing our content because, look, in almost every situation, the evergreen stuff kills it. So if you guys are not reposting your best old content, start testing it because you're leaving traffic on the table. You're leaving customers. You're leaving acquisitions. You're leaving email subscribers on the table because look at this. 49,000 sessions in June. 68,000 in June and 80,000 in May were because we republished on the social networks content that was technically old. And in some cases, that's way more than what the new stuff does. And it makes a lot of sense, right? So here's what you can do now. You can prove that what you're doing is working. And as I said in the beginning of this presentation, most of you were like me. You don't have any idea as to whether you should continue to do something on LinkedIn or whether you should continue to do something on Pinterest or any of these other social networks. You just don't know because you're not tracking it. Now you'll know where you should focus your efforts. And it's especially because you've set up a goal and you're tracking that goal. You can spot trends. Like, for example, you can begin to see what the heck is going on with Facebook. You'll begin to see that your Facebook traffic is heading in this particular direction from your efforts, okay? You'll know it's because of what you're doing. And maybe you can begin experimenting with different types of content on Facebook. Maybe you should have videos with a link underneath them or something along those lines. You can test all sorts of stuff. And in the end, you can prove that your social activities are actually moving the needle. So with that, any other questions? Yes.
Okay, I'm just trying to work this out in my mind. So if I were to test like the photo, no photo one,
Yes.
I'm creating a completely separate link. So I'm going to have one link for new content. Let's call it a side jobs post. New post. So there's a link for that, and then there's also a link for one with a no photo and one for a yes photo.
Yeah, this fourth.
Same post.
Yeah, see, if I go all the way back, you see this little. There's campaign source, medium, and name, but there's this other thing called campaign content, which is a variable that you could ultimately start using.
So you're just using that to test.
To test experiments, yeah.
And we're going right.
Yeah, because everything else is still going to classify into like Facebook page, new, and then you run the test.
Okay.
in this other thing called content. And the good news is you can still use, it just appends another thing to the end that says content equals, and you can run as many experiments as you want.
You mentioned that using a bit.ly, but then you also right after you mentioned be careful using the URL shorteners.
URL shorteners are spam listed. So if you put them in an email, you're going to get in trouble. If you use them on Twitter, you're fine. If you use them on Facebook, I would not recommend it. You don't need to because Facebook doesn't display the URL anyways, right? It just pre-populates kind of a preview. So most of the social networks are moving in that way. So I would only use it on Twitter because I believe that these are negative indicators on a lot of the social networks. If you're using a bit.ly, they think you're trying to hide something, and they hurt you. They choose not to show your stuff. On Twitter, that's the exception. What other questions? Because I saw more hands up. Yes.
Slightly abstract still is Facebook made their recent update. I noticed that my newsfeed penetration has dropped about 10 to 25%. Unless I get at least 10% connected to the notes of people who will like or comment on it, it goes back up to about 75%. Is there anything that you know?
Facebook is, the days of organic, non-paid for reach on Facebook are coming to a hard stop. Let me be the first to announce the news, you guys. You're going to have to start paying for Facebook. If you want, unless you happen to have a gargantuous Facebook page like we do, but we've seen radical declines. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of fans we've got, but we've seen radical declines. Those numbers, are older numbers. They're way lower than that now. So if you put some money behind it, you're going to see more traffic. But no matter what you do, you're competing with 1 million advertisers that are willing to pay for a fast pass. So maybe you should start experimenting because Facebook advertising is quite economical. And when you're using UTM parameters in your Facebook ads and you actually know what the value of a customer or a prospect or a lead is, then maybe it's worth it to spend it, right? Because at this point, that's the only way to get the exposure. Why is that? Because the news feed that you see on Facebook, the average person is only going to see X number of posts in a day. And they want to make sure that they see from their friends before they see from businesses. And the likelihood that your stuff is going to be seen they're not letting your stuff be seen. Instead, they're pushing those ads that are targeted to those people in place because it's supply and demand. It's that simple. There's more advertisers than there is spots. That's why. Zuckerberg's really smart. He's making a lot of money. All right, you guys, that's it. Thank you so much. I will be here to talk to you if you want to come up and talk to me.